You'll know the guy from his unique salt spraying technique. So much so that he was nicknamed Salt Bae, a name that has stuck more than his actual birth name, which he started with. Of course, we can't also forget his unmistakable dark spectacles, which add to his more edgy look. You can literally say he took his 15 minutes of fame and ran with it, making him one of the world's most famous chefs with a whopping net worth of $70 million and more than $60 million in revenue. But more recently, he has come under some very serious controversies and scandals that have caused many dents in his restaurant career. So, is the goofy, entertaining Salt Bae just a cover for a real monster within? Let's find out. His background, from grass to grace. Many would say he worked really hard and deserves all the glory that comes to him now. But to really understand the context, we'd have to tell the story from the beginning. Nusret Göçe is his name. He was born in Turkey in 1983 in the Şenkaya district of Erzurum province to a Kurdish family. He basically grew up in a poor home, with his father working in the mines with very little pay. Because of this, he was forced to leave school at the early age of 12 and go to work as an apprentice butcher in the Kadıköy district of Istanbul. In 2007, at the age of 24, he started traveling around the world to countries like Argentina and the United States, where he worked at local restaurants for free to gain more knowledge and experience as a chef and restaurateur. Then, in 2010, he returned to Turkey, and that was the beginning of his rise to stardom. That same year, he opened his first ever restaurant in Istanbul called Nusret, which would later become a chain of luxury steakhouses. His restaurant success. The beginning of his restaurant business in 2010 was an instant success, and the reviews were a testament to that. People loved the food, the service, and mostly the cost. It was a place where you could have really good food at a pretty decent rate too. Then, $70 was enough to feed 3 people a 3-course meal with coffee and soft drinks. Less than 5 years later, seeing the success he had achieved from his first restaurant, he opened a second in Dubai, where the high and mighty dine. Now, unlike his initial design and style, Salt Bae decided to bring a share of his fine dining steak experience to the rich and strikingly wealthy. It was all about the flair, excess, and extravagant spending of money on a 24-karat gold-plated tomahawk steak. Such a fancy name. It was the perfect place to eat for people who love the good life and love to flaunt it. And pretty soon enough, videos of Salt Bae suavely serving his wealthy customers with style and finesse started making the rounds on social media. Still, it wasn't until 2017 when he posted a video of him slicing a bone-in steak and finishing up with his signature salt sprinkle did he make major waves. The video immediately went viral, receiving millions of views in a short span of time, and that was how the name Salt Bae was born. Since then, Salt Bae's Nusret Steakhouse has expanded to 28 locations worldwide, including 7 in the US, with spots in Miami, Las Vegas, New York City, and Beverly Hills. The rest of the restaurants are spread across various international destinations like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, London, Turkey, and Mykonos. According to Restaurant Dive, the company experienced a 57% global sales growth from 2018 to 2022, hitting $225 million. In the US alone, sales increased by 38%, reaching $61.7 million in 2022. And with that, he has been able to host many celebrities, world stars, and even presidents in many of his restaurants. A few of them are Leonardo DiCaprio, Jason Statham, Lionel Messi, Maradona, Kylian Mbappe, Tommy Hilfiger, Naomi Campbell, and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Now, that's quite a success story. But aside from all the accolades he's received, Salt Bae remains one of the most controversial and probably disliked chefs in the world. Why is he hated? Now, we've understood his life's journey from growing up in a poor household to working hard, leveraging on his fame and building an empire for himself. It is truly a commendable feat, but is that enough to justify some of his questionable actions that have sparked lots of hate among people? Over the last few years, his name and restaurant have come under serious hot waters, from violating laws to restaurant closures, rapidly declining reviews, ill treatment of staff, being overly controlling, and recording his lowest growth on Instagram in over 6 years. Let's uncover some of the hidden secrets you never knew about Salt Bae. Overpriced, poorly cooked foods. At first, Nusret catered to people who wanted to have a good meal at a reasonable price. But after a year or two, the restaurant's food prices began to scale over the roof. To put it simply, they became too overpriced. $70 could no longer feed 3 people. Instead, you'd have to spend at least $500 per person for a decent meal. And if you're thinking of treating yourself to some gilded tomahawk steak or his signature bone-in Wagyu ribeye encrusted in 24-karat gold leaf, then be ready to spend at least $1,500 and probably triple or quadruple that price for a table of 4. That's not all. On top of that, customer service also became a huge problem, which is evident in some of the poorly rated reviews. One particular incident that made the news was a food bill at his London restaurant, which racked up to $32,000 all in just one night. The group had ordered large portions of food and wines, which, as you'd expect, were overly pricey. However, that wasn't the only problem. People also noticed the service charge at the bottom of the bill, which totaled $4,829. Let that sink in for a minute. A whopping $4,829 just for a service charge. Reacting to the post shared, people were outraged at how expensive the service charge was, and some even labeled him a fraud. Well, it wouldn't be the first time Salt Bae's eye-watering prices and flamboyant service have caused a stir online. Still, there have also been incidents where customers rated the Salt Bae experience very poorly, with reports of undercooked or under-seasoned steaks and soggy hamburgers. I guess you can say all that glitters isn't gold. Poor treatment of staff. The next big fuss started when 4 of Salt Bae's staff claimed that he was taking 3% of their total tips. Things got messier when they confronted him about it, leading him to firing them. In response, the employees decided to take legal action, filing a wrongful termination lawsuit. They argued that their former boss had this whole dictator vibe, not caring much about local laws. They even threw in some dramatic comparisons, saying Salt Bae saw himself like Tony Montana and embarrassed them at times. Salt Bae, on the other hand, came out swinging, denying that he ever took a cut from the employees' tips. He insisted that their performance didn't meet his standards, and that's why he let them go. But these 4 weren't alone in claiming mistreatment. Another ex-employee from his London restaurant spilt the tea, describing Salt Bae as a shiny facade with a dumpster inside. Then there's Frank Tefano, a former employee who felt he got the short end of the stick just for being American. World Cup Finals controversy. You can say that going viral is what helped Salt Bae gain success, but that same spotlight has also revealed his true character. At the 2022 World Cup Finals in Qatar, Salt Bae had on full display his main character syndrome and how much he really does love to get all of the attention to himself. At the end of the match, with Argentina celebrating their victory after their win against France, Salt Bae did the unthinkable. Just moments after the players experienced one of the most emotional highs of their lives, Salt Bae, who was clearly unrelated to the event and a non-Argentinian man, inexplicably appeared next to them on the pitch. How he got there, we don't know. He even proceeded to take the World Cup trophy from the players and began touching, lifting, and even kissing it. Now, it was a situation where he had no right and no business to be involved in. The internet was yet again on fire with shades at him. And this time, it wasn't 2017's bewilderment and intrigue for his creativity. It was disgust, cringe, and anger towards the chef. As a result, Salt Bae also got into trouble and is currently under investigation by FIFA for gaining undue access to the pitch. According to them, only a very select few are allowed to touch the World Cup, including former winners and heads of state, which obviously he was none of the above. The US Open Cup Championships even took an early step and banned Salt Bae from any of their events in order to avoid his little antics. Venezuelan protests. In September 2018, Salt Bae faced criticism once again for hosting Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. This stirred up anger because at that time, 64% of Venezuelans reported significant weight loss, averaging 11 kilos or 24 pounds due to worsening food shortages. People were upset that Maduro chose to indulge in a lavish meal, while many in Venezuela were suffering from starvation. People were pretty ticked off that President Maduro was living it up in a fancy restaurant, while back in Venezuela, people were struggling to put food on the table. Then, after the president cleared the air that he was personally invited by Salt Bae himself, things got really heated with protests outside his Miami restaurant. Interestingly, this controversy wasn't even Salt Bae's most significant uproar. Istanbul restaurant fire incident. Just weeks after the protests, Salt Bae was again faced with another shocking incident, which unfolded at his Istanbul restaurant. It was reported that 4 tourists were accidentally set on fire during a fire stunt gone wrong. Among the victims was Tina Stresnikova, a Czechoslovakian YouTuber and model who suffered severe burns covering more than 35% of her body. Even today, noticeable burn scars linger on her body, a lasting reminder of that fateful day. In a heartfelt 23-minute video titled "The Moment That Changed My Life," Tina shared her harrowing experience. Unfortunately, it's all in Czechoslovakian and there are no subtitles. But a year later, we find out she hasn't got a penny in compensation. And the worst part? It was reported that the restaurant apparently trashed all evidence related to the incident. So, can we now say Salt Bae's 15 minutes of fame is finally up?